Hello, souls and demons, and welcome back to the show. Today's story is called Dead Children's Playground, and it was written by Drake Cooper. And with that, let's sit back, grip our seats, and enjoy this tale. A light blue sky faded to gray as the sun began to set in a cloudless sky. The smell of honeysuckle was in the air, and the sound of crickets chimed. Two moms sat gossiping on a bench. Their children have a play date, something the two have done every week for as long as their young minds can remember. They were best friends, but could get competitive when it came to playing games. Eva and Harper raced to the swing set. "First!" Harper yelled, grabbing the chain attached to the swing seat. "You got a head start." "That's cheating!" Eva protested. "I bet I can swing higher than you." Harper planted herself in the seat of the swing. "I have a better idea. Let's see who can jump the farthest." Eva took a seat beside Harper. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the chains of the swing, a look of determination across her young face. The girls pushed off, kicking up a cloud of dust and mulch. They kicked their legs out, propelling forward. The two gained momentum, swinging higher and higher. "On the count of 3, we jump," Harper said. 1, 2, 3. Both girls leave their seats and sail forward. Harper landed on her feet a few feet away, struggling to keep her balance but sticking the landing. Eva leaned forward. She is tired of always coming up short to Harper. She must jump farther. Eva landed inches in front of Harper. It didn't matter by how much she beat her, as long as she did. Eva's victory was short-lived. Her momentum caused her to fall forward. She stuck her hands out, bracing for impact. She hit the ground and rolled before coming to a stop. She lay on the ground for a moment, trying to feel out if anything was hurt, escaping with only a few scrapes and bruises. Eva opened her eyes, and another girl around the same age as herself hovered over her. She wore a blue dress with her hair in pigtails, and an oversized white bow decorated her black hair, accompanied by a pair of black Chuck Taylors. The girl extended her hand to Eva. "Hi, I'm Claire. Nice to meet you." Eva accepted her hand and pulled herself up, brushing the black mulch from her clothes. "I'm Eva, and this is Harper." She motioned to Harper, who wore a sour face after being defeated in the jumping contest. "If you girls are interested, I know a game we can all play." Claire pointed to the woods that border the playground. "It's just over there, beyond the trees." "Our moms told us not to leave the playground," Eva replied. "It's just a few feet from the playground. You can trust me, Eva," Claire said, still pointing to the woods. "Let's go play over here, Eva. This girl is creepy," Harper said. The scowl on Claire's face showed offense at being called weird. "Not everything has to be a competition. You can have fun with me, Eva. Unlike that little bitch, Harper." Eva gasped at the foul language the little girl used. "I'm telling Mom you said a bad word." Harper approached Claire with her hands on her hips. "You'll do no such thing, or I'll cut your fucking tongue out. Do you understand?" Claire shoved her open palm into Harper's chest, sending her backwards to the ground. "Now, come with me to the woods, Eva." "No, I can't," Eva replied. "This time, I'm not asking." The white in Claire's eyes flooded with black. As Eva made eye contact, her eyes glazed over, and she fell silently into a trance. Harper looked around. The earth has stopped around her. No wind hit her in the face. Birds hung frozen in midair. It was like being in a video game and someone pushed the pause button. Without a word, Claire walked to the woods with Eva in tow. "Eva, come back!" Harper yelled. Eva ignored her pleas and continued to mindlessly follow Claire. As the two disappeared into the tree line, the wind began to blow and the birds came alive, soaring through the air once again. Harper ran across the park to tell their moms what had happened. Eva snapped out of her trance and looked around to find herself in a clearing. Her arms and legs are tied together. She's sitting in the dirt with weird symbols drawn around her. Claire is sitting in front of her, just outside the circle of symbols. Welcome back. If you scream, I will not hesitate to kill you. And all of this will be for nothing. Claire's eyes have lost the total blackout look for the hazel color they were when she first appeared. Eva wanted to scream. She wanted to live more. Why am I tied up? Eva's voice sounded shaky and frail. Tears formed in her eyes and trickled down her cheeks, around her trembling lips, and off her chin to be soaked up by the dirt beneath her. I'm glad you chose not to scream. I don't like being mean to little ones. I know that doesn't mean much with you tied up, but this is something that I have to do. Being excessively mean is inhumane. Since you have been such a good girl, I will answer your question. Claire picked up a large knife from the ground, then ran her finger over the blade down to the tip. The tip of the blade opened a small slice in Claire's finger. She entered the circle and drew another symbol on Eva's forehead with the blood from her cut. Eva sat quietly as this process took place, too afraid to run or scream. You see, the Dark Lord has blessed me with supernatural powers. To keep these powers, he only asks for one thing in return. In the distance, a voice yelling Eva's name rang through the trees. Harper had succeeded in alerting their parents. Claire knew she must act fast. She recited a sacrificial prayer to her Lord. Claire mumbled the last words, just as Eva's mom raced into the clearing. Eva! Mom! Eva spoke her last words. Claire ran the blade across the child's neck in a swift motion. A fatal wound opened and began to pour forth the blood necessary for Claire to complete the sacrifice. The ground trembled, and a red hue surrounded the circle. Eva stretched her arm out towards her mother, ignoring everything happening around them. She ran to her daughter and scooped Eva up, trying to comfort her in her last moments. I love you, Eva, she said to her daughter as Eva clutched her mom tight and took her last breath. What the fuck have you done? Eva's mother grabbed the knife Claire had dropped in all the commotion. Standing before her, Claire is no longer an innocent-looking child. She is now a woman with white hair and a long, flowing black dress. I'm sorry for your loss, she said with a puff of smoke. Claire disappeared, leaving the family in ruins. Not all of Eva's blood was soaked up by the symbols carved into the earth. Claire managed to come catch some in a flask, enough to finish the ritual. Normally, she had time to fill the flask, but had just managed to escape with it half full. The many sacrifices Claire had performed ate away at her. The images of killing children pervaded her mind. The result helped ease those thoughts, though. For everlasting youth and the power of dark magic taking over her soul numbed her. She could take the life of a child just as easily as everyday people put on a pair of socks to start the day. This time was different, because of the mother. The misery and despair that filled the mother's eyes as her child took her last breath hurt as much as the first time she took the life of an innocent child. The memories tossed Claire into a recollection of her own daughters. A pretty young girl and smart as a whip. She was truly advanced for the time and for her age. It was her intelligence that would be her downfall. After beating a young man in a battle of wits and sending him crying back home, his father accused her of witchcraft. That was much easier than acknowledging the presence of a smart young woman, and that their son was an idiot, destined to be nothing more than a groomer of the stool. Claire spit on the ground at the thought of the boy. That same night, the townspeople took her and her husband from their home, tying her little girl to the bed before setting fire to the house. She tried to rush in and save her, but they would have none of that. "The witch must die," they chanted in unison while pinning Claire to the ground. She lay there helpless, her sobs the only thing drowning out the screams of her child. That's when Claire's journey down this dark path first began. The town wanted a witch. She would give them a witch. They would pay for their sins. Claire stormed from her shack, in need of a walk to clear the destructive thoughts from her mind. Outside of her home, she hesitated, sensing another presence with her. The energy she felt from it was one of great sorrow, rage, and vengefulness. Claire continued her walk. She will leave the presence for now, but knows eventually it will come for her. But that bridge will be crossed when it does. Claire's aimless walk through the woods brought her back to the empty playground, which carried an eerie look and feel this late at night. She transformed herself back into that little girl, the innocent form that had gained the trust of so many children, only to be led to their deaths. Claire took a seat on the swing and opened the top of the flask. She poured a bit of blood onto her fingers and drew an upside-down cross on her forehead. Then she said a prayer to the Father of Sin and drank the rest. The blood hit her stomach and flowed through her like heroin through a junkie's veins. The crippling thoughts from earlier disappeared, and a feeling of euphoria took hold. Her eyes faded to black. Claire slowly began to swing back and forth, basking in the feeling of the dark magic as it flowed through her. A month had gone by since Alice lost her little girl. She lay in bed. Complete darkness surrounded her, except for a flicker of light coming from the television. It provided background noise, keeping her grounded to reality. She didn't want to sleep. She only found herself back in the clearing, Eva reaching out to her with blood-drenched hands, begging for help. Avenging Eva's death was the only factor that forced her out of bed every morning. The police pretended to care, but they were putting minimal effort into finding her daughter's killer. It took her just a few hours to track down the shack where the witch stayed, not far from the clearing where her daughter was taken. The investigators had been looking for weeks with no leads. She could report her findings, but when she told people a witch killed her child, they looked at her like she was crazy, like she was insane. Having the police arrest the murderer wouldn't be justice enough for Eva. What would be satisfying would be to watch the life drain from Claire's eyes. Alice went to the shack every night, just out of view, careful to be silent and cover her tracks. Watching the witch for weeks, she had Claire's routine down to the second. Every night, she left the rundown shack for 10 to 20 minutes. This window would allow Alice to sneak in and surprise her with a chest full of bullets upon her return. Hollow point bullets, blessed by a priest, and soaked with a special potion designed to destroy witches of Claire's caliber. A potion that has taken her weeks of research and time to find the exact ingredients. A potion that was finally complete and ready for use. Alice hid in the undergrowth outside the shack, magazine loaded with blessed bullets, and waited. The rickety door squealed as it opened, the hinges rusted from years of neglect. The leaves crunched under Claire's feet with each step. Alice stayed silent until the sound of footsteps grew distant and faded away. Alice entered the shanty, finding nothing spectacular about it. A chandelier made from deer antlers hung from the ceiling, and a large quantity of candles were placed around the room. symbols had been carved into the walls, some of which Alice recognizes from the clearing. A single picture sat on top of the mantel over a fireplace that looked as though it hadn't seen use in decades. An old wooden rocking chair sat in the corner, which is where Alice would sit and wait for Claire's return. As soon as she stepped through the door, Alice planned on greeting her with a bullet. Dread took over as she sat. She had never taken a life before, but images of the day in the clearing flooded her memory. The dread she felt slowly turned to anger. She took my baby. This bitch has to die, she thought, as she waited and waited. She would wait, for however long it took. A while later, she perked up at the sound of approaching footsteps. Beads of sweat lined her forehead despite the cool evening. She worked to steady her shaking hands. The old wooden floorboard of the makeshift porch creaked, and the footsteps stopped at the door. With quivering hands, Alice raised the pistol, with her finger ready to squeeze the trigger, intent on sending Claire back to hell where she belonged. The door swung open, and Alice took her shot. Wood splintered as the bullet connected with the door frame, but no one is there. Only empty space fills the opening. Alice stands and slowly approaches the door, gun still drawn. A familiar voice fills the air. "Mommy? Why are you trying to shoot me?" Eva rounded the corner and looked at Alice with watery eyes. "No, baby. I thought you were that evil witch. I would never hurt you." Alice placed the pistol in her waistband and hurried to hug her daughter. "How are you here? I saw you die." She wrapped her arms around her and squeezed tight. "Claire hasn't hurt you, has she?" Alice placed a kiss on Eva's forehead. "I love you, Eva. I never thought I would see you again." They embraced in another hug that Alice wished could last forever. "I love you too, Mommy." Eva's voice is so low and gravelly, it causes Alice to pull away. Eva held out her hands, glaring at them with confusion. They watched as her hands slowly turned to ash, and then spread from her hands to her torso. "Please help me, Mommy," Eva squeaked out just before the ash takes her over fully, and she collapsed into a pile on the floor. Alice ran her hands through the ashes, crying out for Eva. Depression sunk in, like it hasn't since the day in that clearing. Alice sensed Claire in the room but didn't care to look. At this moment, she only wished Claire would cut her own throat, like she had done to Eva's, and end her suffering. The pain that had driven her to attempt murder now has her lying in a pile of ash, wishing for death. "I know this is hard for you." Claire's voice filled the silence. Alice turned to face her. "Have you ever lost a child? How can you know the pain I feel?" "I did what I had to do," Claire responded. "You didn't have to kill my daughter." Alice's voice shook with rage. "Her sacrifice was necessary. Without it, my powers would dwindle down to nothing, and I would die. I know you're acting out of hurt and anger, so I will give you this chance to walk away and never look back," Claire said. "Fuck you and your powers. Your sacrifice was for nothing. You die tonight." Claire tilted her head to the side like a confused puppy. She wondered what Alice could possibly have in store. Alice pulled the gun from her waist and aimed it at Claire's chest. Claire held out her hand, preparing to vaporize the mother with a flick of her wrist, but stopped herself. Hundreds of years have gone by. The townspeople that took her daughter are long gone. She finds herself no better than they were, taking the lives of children for her own selfish needs. It's finally time to end the cycle of hate and misery. Claire dropped her hands to her side and waited for the inevitable. Alice unloaded the bullets into Claire's chest. With each shot, Claire stumbled backwards. The hollow points expanded as they contacted the soft tissue, tearing through Claire like scissors through tissue paper. Some made it all the way through, exited her back, and sprayed blood on the wall behind her. She tried to breathe, but her lungs were torn to shreds. Her howls came out as gargles and blood seeped from her mouth, ran down her chin, and pooled beneath her. Claire slowly dropped to one knee, then the other, before face-planting on the floor in a shower of her own blood. She could easily heal herself, but the violence stops here. She can't allow herself to continue like this. Not in the name of her daughter. A whoosh surprised Alice as Claire's body burst into flames. Alice rushed through the open door, turning around to look once she was outside the shack. She watched as the flames engulfed it. The sunlight had faded away to darkness, but the flames illuminated the surrounding area as they reached towards the sky, past the treetops. She doesn't leave until the fire is out, and the shack is a pile of smoldering embers on the forest floor. Alice walks through the woods. The atmosphere around her felt lighter. The song of the crickets sounded happy. The air smelled more inviting. Nature came alive around her. A great evil that had plagued the land had been vanquished, and it seemed as though they came back to thank Alice for her good deed. She exited the woods to the playground and felt a tiny hand grasp hers. She looked down with a smile to see Eva walking with her. The playground was filled with children. They stood around the swings, watching the pair walk towards them. Eva broke her grip and ran over to the other children. "Thanks for setting us free, Mom. I love you. I love you too, baby." One child took Eva by the hand. They smiled, giggled, and skipped away. Eva turned and waved at her mom one last time, before the spirits faded from the playground.